Hello, and welcome back to the Reach In Talk Show with yours truly, Dr. Nicole Lynette, your host, where we talk all things life and wellness. Well, family, we're here for another show. As we know, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and the stories and the topics have been really heavy. They've been hard, but they've been absolutely necessary. So this week we have with us a special guest who's going to help us unpack prevention of child sexual abuse in regards to community. This young man, he's a mover and shaker. He's a change agent in our communities. He's the former Mayor Pro Tem of the city of West Columbia, and he is a professor, y'all. So we have a smart gentleman in our studio today. And not only that, he's a very compassionate young man. And I want you all to welcome none other but the Honorable Judge Dietrich von Biedenfeld. Hopefully I didn't jack that up too much.
That was beautiful.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for saying yes. Because this topic that we're talking about today, so many people seem to run from it.
And I'm a person of lapel pins, and I usually have my blue and silver pinwheel, but I left it in the car. So
okay.
That is the April's signifier, and we have them all over Brazoria County.
Okay, awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What do you...
Absolutely. So I grew up in Houston. I had the privilege of having a very diverse upbringing, and that started, of course, with my parents. My father is from East Germany.
Okay.
He grew up in World War II. He was flown over by the U.S. government, and he worked for the government ever since. And my mother was a school teacher for many years, but she was also a musical therapist, and she was one of the first black women to play with the Houston Symphony.
Oh, wow.
And her father was one of the first black direct hires for Dow Petrochemical Company. So
wow.
They were both from backgrounds that created challenges. My father coming over with nothing, my mother being black in the 40s.
Right.
But they built something. And then, of course, in my upbringing here, I attended Second Baptist until my junior year of high school.
Okay.
And then, while playing in the summer jazz workshop with Ronald Thornton, he recruited me to Willow Ridge High School.
Okay.
He said, "Why are you playing with these 12 people?" He had more to say than that. We'll leave that alone. And so they gave me an address in Fort Bend County, and I drove to Willow Ridge for my junior and senior year. I did both proms, junior and senior year at Willow Ridge and Second Baptist. I went off to Loyola, New Orleans. I had a major car accident. We spoke about that earlier.
Wow.
Where I had a very large, my father being German, we all had Mercedes to start.
Right.
And it became a can around me, and so I had to reload the reed, traumatic brain injury. But even though I was given the excuse by my doctors to sit at home, my parents said, we overcame adversity. My father was shot at by Russians.
Right.
My mother experienced the discrimination of the 60s, the fire hoses, the eviction proceedings in Chicago, in various Cabrini Greens situations and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, no, you're going to continue to achieve. And so I persisted in my education. I finished up at UH, and I did post-grad work there as well. I went to Ole Miss for law school. Intervening time, I worked in Japan. But now I've been very blessed to work and support students at University of Houston downtown. Privileged to serve the community in Brazoria County as president of the Brazoria County Citizens Association, mayor pro tem of the city of West Columbia. 10 years I served on council. Now I'm going into 1 year as the municipal judge. And so it's been a whirlwind. It's been a great time. I've served 2 governors in capacities, really working towards empowering disadvantaged communities. Sometimes the politics of these situations don't really match the ideals.
Right.
The vision and values aren't matched with funding.
Right.
But I continue to persist and work in these roles for the greater state of Texas. And, of course, I've worked nationally and internationally for veterans, for environmental law, and some other areas. So it's been a great journey, and it's a little bit tiring sometimes, but it's a privilege.
Wow. All of that, I was just waiting for you to say, so I'm getting ready to start my candidacy for presidency. I mean, you're like, okay, so working on your presidency. I was going to say, you have my vote, right?
Thank you. I've been looking over the school in Punahou in Honolulu. My sister was a professor at University of Hawaii, and so I've seen Obama's school many times.
Okay, all right. Wow, so, certain things stuck out to me. Number one, you come from a lineage of history makers and impactors. And I see that in you. I mean, when I first met you, it was so amazing to me. All I said was, I told you what I did, and I said, "What are you doing?" He was like, "Whatever you need me to do, Dr. Nicole." And I've been doing you ever since. But there's a word that I keep hearing of value with you, and that's you've served here, you've served there. And to have a heart of a servant, which is really what leadership is about. A lot of times people think leadership is about dictatorship or giving orders, but leading is about serving people. And that's why you've been such a phenomenal leader, because you are a phenomenal servant of people. And I know you're going to continue to advance in that which your parents have imparted to you. And I read you're the youngest of your siblings.
I am.
You're the youngest, so you're the baby boy.
I like to think they got it right, and so they stopped, right?
They
Once
stopped,
you hit
right.
perfection, why make more?
It's like, that's it. You can't get no more perfect than this. So I was thinking about, even when you shared about your adversity for the accident, I thought that was even more phenomenal, and I'm glad you shared that. Because sometimes I read you dealt with what area when it came to disabilities, people with disabilities, making sure they were able to access resources and opportunities, even with disabilities. And some of that was afforded because of what you experienced with your accident.
Right, and I think it's a reminder of the important work that you do, particularly with Resuscitate, in the sense that sometimes people have a great understanding of the overall idea, but they don't know the tactical, or they know the tactical, that is, they see the trees, but they don't know the forest.
Right.
And a lot of people are good at one. You're great at both, right? You see the forest, you see the trees, and you kind of work within that.
Right.
That's a distinct, unique gift that you have. And within that mission, one of the challenges we had on the Texas Council for Purchasing with Disabilities, I was a state Senate confirmed member appointed by Governor Rick Perry. The only way to get rid of me would have been to impeach me or to sunset the council. And that's what the state legislature did. They sunsetted us. Now, we were creating, from a fiscal conservative standpoint, we were saving the state of Texas hundreds of millions of dollars a year in additional assistive aid. We were creating economic empowerment for people who are blind, deaf, mentally challenged, learning disabilities, and so forth. And they were able to contribute to their communities and contribute to their self-value through doing meaningful work in different jobs that met their capacity, right? So this country is founded on equal opportunity. We're not all equal. I can't have a baby, right? I can't run a marathon. I barely finished that 5K at St. Arnold's the other week, right?
Well, at least you started.
I tried it, right? But we're all equally, we should all be afforded this equal opportunity. And so when we looked at the work we were doing on the council after 4 years of me being on there, we were reducing the amount of mental health needs of those individuals because they weren't having to seek depression counseling. They had a community of fellow deaf, blind, etc. individuals that they worked with, and they were able to show their value to the community because they were bringing a paycheck home. And the state said, well, it's impacting the fiscal bottom line of some of our donors, and so we're going to get rid of you. And that hits you because you're like, we're doing good work. And from a fiscally conservative standpoint, from a socially conservative, from a biblical standpoint, we were doing everything right. One of the challenges they gave us was that we didn't spend enough time arguing in meetings, basically. And I said, because we do our homework. We don't have to argue in the meetings because we did our homework before the meetings.
Okay, so I heard three things here. Okay, so first of all, there was not a lot of need for counseling and depression because this particular group of individuals, of disabled individuals, they had camaraderie, they had a community, they had wraparound safety net around them of individuals who could identify with where they were, so they were able to talk to one another and encourage one another while they were being impactful and also impacted positively, because now, wow, we actually have people who see us and who understand that we have needs as well and we're no longer neglected. But then your son said it because you're not caught up in the political rhetoric of, like you say, meeting to meet rather than meeting to make impact. And that is something that is unfortunately a barrier to a lot of our disadvantaged communities, because I call it, we have the wrong gatekeepers in position. Because another thing you said was, because really the impact and the value you were adding to the disabled community was impacting their donors. So basically, if these donors supported me during my candidacy, then I'm worried more about them than the ones that really need the resources.
And you know this, and you've got the
Right.
statistics better than me in the sense of, how do you deal with something when men report sexual abuse less than women? How do you deal with it when you've got an invisible disability,
Yeah.
such as a traumatic brain
Right,
injury?
right,
People
right.
meet me,
Right.
and they say, wow, you're very articulate, you wear a tie.
Right.
They don't know that I've got to take 20 minutes longer than I used to read a
Right.
book.
Right.
Because maybe I'm still reading the book faster than them, but that's not the point. The point
Right.
is, it's slow for me.
Right. Right.
And you know this, and you know that when you're trying to make a difference with gatekeepers, there's oftentimes a protectionism, right? And so you're talking to the pastor, you're talking to the principal, and they, not in my house.
Right.
Well,
We're going to
have
talk
you-
about that later.
Have you looked in your house? Well, let's not do that, right?
Right.
So,
and
so-
oftentimes they've looked in their houses. And it's unfortunately, back in the day, every time I say that, I think about my parents. Back in the day, what goes on in my house, we're going to keep it in my house because we're not going to expose this. And so, but you know what? Since we're jumping that way, we might as well just go. But we're going to jump that way right after this. Welcome back. This is Dr. Nicole Lynette with the Reach In Talk Show, where we talk all things life and wellness. We're back today talking about sexual abuse prevention of children regarding to our communities. And we have our Honorable Dr. Dietrich von Biedenfeld here with us to help us unpack this prevalent topic. So before we went to break, let's just talk about it. As you were stating, the gatekeepers, the pastors, the politicians, elected officials, all these people that don't want to talk about the sexual abuse of children, but yet it is one of the most prevalent public health issues. So when we're talking about, and this is the Centers of Disease Control statistics, 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 13 boys will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. 90% of those who abuse them are people they know or their families are familiar with. And those are the statistics. However, what challenged me about the data from the CDC was that the gap for prevention is the lack of prevention resources. And there are some there, but they're not disseminated as they should be. And my question is, if the government is aware of this, then why is that still a challenge? Why is that still an issue? Because right now, everybody's jumping on trafficking, which we should give attention to human trafficking. I've worked with organizations to help rescue a girl out of trafficking, so I know that process. But sometimes it seems to me, I was doing a presentation one day about what we do at Resuscitate, and I talked about the statistics of the 90%. And then I was asked a very valuable question. The gentleman said, so how do you avoid the challenge of just focusing on the 10%, which is the stranger danger? How do I focus on that? I told him I choose not to focus on the 10% because everybody's focusing on the 10%. What are we going to do with the 90%? You know? So just let's dialogue a little bit about that.
Diving into it, I mean, we've got the Pareto principle, right? 80-20 rule. We've got a number of statistics in Australia, United States, et cetera. I mean, there are very similar numbers where we think about the impact just generally on the low ball end, because we're oftentimes dealing with reported statistics, not actual statistics.
Right.
People don't like to make these distinctions.
Right.
Price versus cost is something we talk about in the business school, right? We talk about how much did this water cost you, and people say $2. Well, did you wait in line for it? Did you get a parking ticket while you purchased it? There was an overall cost, and then we talk about the opportunity cost. What else could you have been buying instead of this water? You could have been buying some cryptocurrency and made $20 million. So what you're talking about is the price. People don't like complexity typically. We've done research on people not liking more than 3 choices for things. So we've got the psychological, sociological factor that the voters, the stakeholders, the parishioners don't like more complexity. So they're already averse to it. The people that should have the most interest and the people that have the most to lose already say, could you spell it out for me? Could you put it in ABC terms? So that's on us as voters, as parishioners of churches, as parents of children in schools. We have to be asking for this accountability, and we are not. So that's on us. But the flip part is, you say, well, if you know that it's potentially $9 billion of cost. Right. I don't know. That'd fix a few streets in my town. Maybe it might buy you a few lunches.
Houston
might do that.
These potholes
might do it. $9 billion with a B, whatever.
Right.
When you think about that, why aren't people doing it? One thing is money, right? There's a lot more money in private prisons than there are in mental health care facilities. One of the hot topics now is the ability of people or entities to kick out assisted living residents where the statutes protect nursing home residents with regard to Medicare funds. So our laws are disproportionate, and oftentimes, going back to the donors, it follow the money. Who benefits when there is something that deals with the challenges? So the symptoms are there, the problems are there, and then suddenly somebody who experienced child sexual abuse experiences criminality. Is it more profitable for the companies that provide the preventative care, or is it more profitable for the emergency care and the incarceration? I mean, these are $210 million incarcerative facilities, right?
Okay. Wait. Okay, so you just answered a question that I've posed to many people, going back to CDC results. There's less investment in prevention, but more investment in, of course, treatment for those who've been traumatized. I say yes. And also for prisons, for the criminals that actually perpetrate.
Have you heard of George Soros?
Have not.
Have you heard of Warren Buffett?
Yes.
Have you heard of the Koch brothers?
Yes.
Have they heard of you?
Probably not. They should.
Absolutely. And wait, you don't want them to, because the challenge then becomes, you end up in these conspiratorial movies where maybe you have somebody else start your car outside because you're trying to undermine a lot of their business model.
Right.
And the reality, not these people in particular, and again, disclaimer, I'm just using some people with billions, with B dollars.
As an example.
Oprah's a good person, right? So we're not talking about her except for the fact that we've heard of her, she hasn't heard of us.
Right.
And your preventative network could undercut their overall corporate strategy. And in that sense, it's not even that people don't acknowledge it. It's not even that people in positions of power or wealth don't accept it. It's that you are creating more complexities to their model. That is the liability associated with providing preventative care and saying, we think this person's better. Oh, wait, this person went out and there was some recidivism. Well, that's a lot more challenging than just saying we locked you up.
But Dietrich, okay, Judge, look. So let's just say this, and I get it. Follow the money, because I really believe everything you just said. Unfortunately, because it confuses me. It's a little complexity there for me that we'd rather take measures of intervention rather than prevention. But our society would be so much healthier if we would prevent sexual abuse from happening in the first place. And I know a lot of times the mental model is prevention is not possible. Prevention is possible. The CDC even has it in their documentation. You can Google it and put in child sexual abuse prevention. They're going to have a fast fact sheet, and you can read through it. They're going to give you statistics. They're going to give you gaps. They're going to give you the ACEs, with children, and they're going to give you all this information. Then they're going to give you the information I just shared, and it is also stated on that form that our society will be better with prevention, right? But don't we want our society to be better?
In the short term, we have short memories. And so this is also a problem as an elected official running on 2-year terms. Mm-hmm. One of the benefits I had is no one wanted the job. But otherwise, I probably would have experienced many contenders because of efforts where we expended money on things that people didn't appreciate because they're complex. Mm-hmm. And instead of saying, hey, we trust the expert, we've lost a lot of that credibility. Some of it's Instagram and TikTok, some of it's hyper-partisanship where Republicans say yes, Democrats say no, and that's all you have to do, or Democrats say yes and Republicans say no, and that's all we need, as opposed to saying, hey, we need this infrastructure. And Kurt Vonnegut said this, right? It's easier to convince people to build than maintain. And so explaining to people in my business of potholes and water purity, hey, we've got to do a bond to buy a $10 million water treatment plant so that we avoid the fines of TCEQ, Texas Environmental Quality Commission, and those ideas, and where we avoid people having to do boil water notices and other things like that. People would say, well, that's raising my taxes. Well, in the short term. But again, if I did that, then I would get voted out in 2 years. And then in 2 years after that, when people saw the benefits and they're like, oh, thank goodness I can flush my toilet still. Thank goodness I can drive on this road. It would be attributed to the person in office at that time, not me, the person who implemented that cost saving, again, that sustainable measure, that strategic measure as opposed to the day-to-day or tactical measure. So some of it, again, goes back to the voters, constituents, parishioners. When the pastor is doing something wrong and you say, we've had a building fund for 30 years and we don't even have a new door. Well, trust the pastor, right? You're challenging authority. And some of this is basic human psychology. We don't want to admit that we're wrong. We don't want to go back and correct ourselves. Growth mindset, fixed mindset. Carol Dweck talks about this. More people are fixed mindset than growth mindset. So telling me I'm wrong is a challenge to me. I'm stupid.
Okay, but in society there's laws. So over the last few weeks, just in honor of Child Abuse Prevention Month, we've talked about prevention of sexual abuse of children in the schools. We've talked about prevention of sexual abuse in the churches. And I do agree with you. It is really the constituents. It's our responsibility to hold elected officials accountable. It's our responsibility to hold pastors accountable, because right now there are actual pastors, and we talked about the Southern Baptist Convention when they were exposed on over a 21-year period from 2000 to 2021 on the different counts of sexual abuse in that convention in the Protestant church, and the lack of accountability that has taken place for so many years. Right now, to this day, there are pastors that are registered sex offenders, and there are specific parishioners and people around them that are protecting them. However, again, it goes back to we're now empowering perpetrators more than we're empowering victims and survivors. And in our communities, and I know there's a lot of red tape when it comes down to political pathways and things of that nature, but as a community of people providing the education, like we do at reach as we do at Resuscitate, our goal is to provide education. And we understand a lot of the pushback is that I've learned it from our house to the church house to the White House, that fear of the risk of liability. The fear of the risk of liability. Like you said, hey, don't come to our house. We're not going to address this because it's too complex. Okay, well, what's complex is when a child is being abused, several children are being abused. Statistics show that one perpetrator, before they're caught, can abuse up to 154 children on average. Think about that. One perpetrator. So in our political world, in our collegiate world, in our ecclesiastical worlds, we're hiding behind the fear of the risk of liability, but we have children from generation to generation, these cycles of abuse that continue. So your money means more than the mental health of our children. I think that's a travesty in our society. And I believe, and for you all who are watching and listening, we have a responsibility because we cannot, I always say representatives are supposed to represent the position of the people. And I just believe that people need to learn their positions. We need to relearn our positions. If we say enough of this, we're tired of our children being abused, we're tired of not being able to access resources, and that's another challenge too, because sometimes, especially disadvantaged communities are not aware that there are certain resources available. And then when they're aware of the resources, they have to learn how to access the resources. And then from accessing the resources, they have to learn how to apply the resources. So we have a whole challenge there. But everything kind of circles around education and then learning how to execute. When there was a teacher just a few months ago, it was in the news, and learning what the signs of a potential perpetrator is very important. A lot of times people want to know, well, what are the signs of a child that may have been abused? Because our mindsets are so stuck on, well, it's probably just going to happen anyway, right? Because we're so reactionary as a people instead of proactive. So even in the political arena, I just want in my heart, I know you're one because you've been an elected official, and I appreciate you because we need millions more like you that will say, you know what? No, I stand for prevention because if our world is going to be a better place, we have to have better practices. We just have to. And we have to protect our children because signs of sexual abuse and the trauma that comes with that, it fuels and it funds our prisons because the children are angry. They're traumatized. And if that trauma is never dealt with, then they grow up with that trauma. And they become angry, they become isolated, they become hard-hearted because nobody cared about me to protect me. I don't care about anybody. Some of them OD on drugs, or they become drug addicts.
And what you're talking about, all this costs society more, not just monetarily, but as far as the potential Beethoven or the potential Einstein or Marie Curie.
Yes.
All of these. So, I mean, there's a broader cost than just the economic. $9 billion minimum. That's a lot of money.
Right.
I mean, my city budget is $6 million. Anybody at home can do the math on that.
Right.
How long you could fund our city on $9 billion. But I think you're talking about something, and it requires mutuality, right? And again, I mentioned Vonnegut. Of course, one of my favorite points is Martin Luther King Jr.'s point about injustice, right? And so we're tied, we're caught up in this network of mutuality. We're tied in a garment of divine destiny. And something that impacts you impacts me. It impacts all of us.
Right.
And we've forgotten that. And so it requires individuals to say, you know what, as an attorney, I'm going to ask my potential client first, did you go to the school and ask them about this?
Right.
So that we don't have just spurious lawsuits, because every time somebody cries wolf, we know this Aesop's fable, then the school immediately has to come out and say, we've got to protect our interests.
Right.
It's not just one student. We've got thousands of other students, and we pay you $50 million. That's a school lunch that little Susie doesn't have.
Right.
That's a textbook that Joe doesn't have.
Right.
That's a bonus that one of our best teachers doesn't have, and she goes back home. So thinking about our interconnection, our mutuality, it does require some re-education. It does require parents to step in and say, the grandparents to step to their children and say, hey, you know your little kid's a liar, no offense, check this. And then conversely, though, for the school to step in and say, we have these preventative measures. We are going to listen to your child first. I don't care if you lied about the first three things. The fourth thing could be a truth. People don't want that balance anymore. We want the simplicity. Again, this is how we've got this hyper-partisanship in politics. This is how in religion we see it. And when you think about the Catholic Church, I mean, I was raised Catholic. I went to a Baptist school, so both of those areas impact me. I was a Boy Scout. I never experienced any sexual trauma. I never experienced any adults. Some of the things were probably due to my parents saying, I need to talk to Joe's parents before you go over there. I need to meet them. So there are some of those steps, but that's where the prevention comes in. That's where Resuscitate comes in with some of these models to say, we're not attacking you. Before it becomes adversarial, before it becomes an attack or an indictment of your parenting, and then people get defensive. Even if you know it was wrong to give your kid ice cream at 2 a.m., right? The old movie Gremlins. You knew not to feed this little thing after 10 p.m. And now you got a whole movie about Gremlins. Right. Because you didn't follow the instructions.
So just to segue there, which is amazing to show you how the partnerships can be very beneficial. In one of our youth-wise prevention camps, well, before we went to the prevention camp, the school, one of the schools hosted, it was a middle school actually, they hosted a parent learning lab, and we were one of the facilitators. And as they rotated their parents through our workshop, the therapist came to us afterwards and said, oh my God, have the parents talked with you? And yes, we had parents that disclosed. They had never disclosed before, both fathers and mothers, saying, wow, we love what you're doing because this happened to us when we were younger, right? And this is why we exercise certain parameters around our children. But the therapist said they had parents coming to them recognizing we may need to get some help for our children. That's how serious that partnership can be. But then moving forward, we provided a youth-wise prevention camp. That's where we have the middle and high school students come in. And it's a 6-week camp. And we hosted it at the public library. And it was free. And we were able to identify children that were under the radar. We asked one specific question. And we found out there were children that had felt like they had no trusted adults. And when a child feels like they don't have a trusted adult, then they feel like they have to carry everything of the world or whatever their challenges in life on their shoulders alone. And they didn't have, and some of their parents were in the room, and they still said they didn't feel like they had a trusted adult. And unfortunately, some parents think that their children trust them, but their children don't trust them with the hard things. But that's a whole nother topic. We can talk about that, why you come to a workshop. But what's significant about that is when children feel like they're alone, they're isolated, they're not seen, they don't have anyone they can trust to talk with, they become susceptible to perpetrators, they become susceptible to gang violence, to gangs, they become susceptible to possible attempts of suicide. And so what we have been able to do with that one question is able to discover who those children are that's under the radar. Our partnership with the school, afterwards, we talk with the therapist to let the therapist know what the results were. And what happened, the therapist was able to connect with those students so those students would no longer feel invisible. And just like you said, see the schools to see the partnerships and the benefit of partnering and getting the education, because there, unfortunately, when you get to middle high school, a lot of kids have already been impacted by sexual abuse, right? Because sexual abuse, the median age is 9, so that's elementary level, and some kids are abused earlier. However, the benefits, and that's what we want, parishioners, these pastors, the schools, the principals to understand. There's a benefit to education, because you rather be on the side of prevention than intervention. And a lot of times, like you said, you have to protect your own self-interest. I understand that. But would you rather have a reputation say, you know what, I'm a principal, I really care about the safety of my children first, my students first. So we're going to make sure we have prevention programs in place, so we won't be on the news like the school that was in the news where the teacher of the year. So that means administrators missed it, the colleagues missed it, parents missed it, everybody missed this teacher that is now being charged with these child sexual assaults. For many years, he was the teacher of the year. This is your school in the news. So now, and we had a chance to actually go to that school after everything happened. And I had been talking to the principal a year before that even happened. So we're so reactionary as a society, and I understand what you're saying about the complexities, but safety of our children shouldn't be that complex.
And here's the crazy thing to me, that we have processes in place. We have cooperative purchasing agencies where Resuscitate could have an existing contract,
Right.
and rather than going through the 90, 120-day bid process,
Right.
a school could say, we've got some coaches, and we don't want to admit that what we're seeing, but we want to bring y'all in and have some training. They
Right.
could click a button, and they could do that cooperative purchasing contract. They could have an MOU with you, a memorandum
Right.
of understanding.
Absolutely.
And then, back in the day, the church was the center of the community. We know
Right.
that church attendance is down. We know that some of the credibility, particularly with the sex abuse
Right.
scandals in the Catholic Church, the Southern Baptist Coalition, those things have undermined the confidence.
Right.
But there's a legal requirement for people to be in K-12.
Yes.
So we've already got a requirement and a ready-made pool of individuals ready to receive proactive education, which is empowerment.
Right.
Education equals empowerment. Time equals
Right.
money. Education equals empowerment. And then you can go out to those schools and provide one training, and even have a separate training for the parents and,
Right.
and a separate meeting with the students.
Yes.
Because each demographic needs to be identifying different things.
Yes.
They need to be reporting different things. And each one needs to have the comfort to know that the children don't need to be afraid that if they report their step parent, that the real parent, the biological
Right,
parent's
right.
going to go to prison too. The school doesn't need to be afraid that there's going to be a $50 million lawsuit,
Exactly.
unless they don't report it in the first place and
Absolutely.
they try to hide it.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, the parents need to know that it's the cost, the emotional cost,
Yes.
the financial cost. I'm a business professor.
Right,
Got to
right,
go
right,
back
right,
to that
right,
money,
right,
the
right.
therapy,
That's the bottom line.
the hospitalization for an
Right.
attempted suicide, etc. The ambulance ride is going to be $5,000.
Right.
So all of those things, each of
Yeah.
those people needs to understand what you're talking about, which is it's cheaper to prevent. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure,
Yes.
and it's cheaper to proactively engage this
Yes.
and address it. And then, instead of saying, you don't want to see sexual abuse everywhere, but if it's 1 in 4 and 1 in 13, you at least have an idea that it's not so isolated. It's not over there.
That's right.
That in our community, of course, the NIMBY term, not in my backyard.
Right.
That usually, for us, it deals with, where you put a chicken plant or something like that. But in the sexual abuse world,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean because you're a good Christian
Right.
and you go to a good Christian church that the parishioner next to you isn't doing this. It doesn't mean that just because your coach is winning awards with the volleyball team that they're not
Yes.
sexually abusing them.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that the teacher of the year isn't
Yes.
abusing them. It doesn't
Right.
mean
Yeah.
that's
Nothing
not.
wrong with that.
Those are two different things.
And and I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things we try and express in our workshops is, and taking the weight off of parents, the guilt. We have to understand that perpetrators are very skilled at placing themselves in positions of trust. They have to have access to children. And so when we talk about grooming, and when they, study these professions and different things, that they most of the time have access to children because that's who they prey upon. And that's why we're having this conversation, right? But, you know, this topic is very extensive and exhaustive, and we can't do it all in one set. But I am so, and you know, I'm very passionate about this topic because children are vulnerable. And it is absolutely the responsibility of adults to protect them and to make sure that they grow and they flourish in an environment of safety. Unfortunately, that is not the reality. And we have to become more educated because if we're not skilled, we don't, you know, if our eyes are not skilled at signs, that's one of the uniqueness of our organization. We teach the signs of a potential perpetrator, not just what it looks like if a child's been abused. Because if you may not have any children, but you can be an active bystander. And once you receive the training, when someone's tickling little Susie too much and little Susie is saying, stop, I don't want to play like that, and the adult is continuing, then it's not normacy, because some behaviors we normalize because we're not educated enough, right?
And some things you take for granted. I'll use an example because, you know, of course, in the Methodist Church, they've got the safe sanctuary
Yes, they do.
training, and you can't have one adult with it.
That's right.
And it's
Isolation.
just common sense. But, you know, at my school,
Common sense is only common to whom it's common to.
Right,
so.
right. It's becoming less common. And, you know, and so
Right.
my school, we're doing a trip overseas, and there is a metric to determine the financial cost of sending 2 professors. And we had a little discussion, and I just raised a question, and it was resolved very quickly. I said, how do you have one person responsible for more than one other person, in the sense of if one of the girls gets sick and you've got a male professor, do you want the male professor going to the bathroom to check on him? Or do you want one of the female students who has no legal responsibility and could say, oh, they're fine, and then something happens?
Right.
It's not about the, you know, it's a quasi state entity, so there's
Right.
a lot of legal protections.
Right.
But reputationally, nobody wants to be at a place where they're not safe. And so then you deal with the larger, again, cost, right? Maybe you win the lawsuit because, well, we've got, you know, governmental immunities. We got sovereign immunity.
Wow.
Well, that's a cute term, but what about the reputational cost and the moral cost?
Yes.
Oop, there we go.
Yes, yes,
Morality. We
yes,
can't talk about that anymore.
yes.
But the moral cost. I said,
You
how,
can't.
you
I
can't.
can't.
Right.
No, go ahead.
Right. You cannot send
Right.
one person to handle a group. You need to
Right.
have at least a 2-person. The buddy system. This goes
Yes,
back to swimming.
yes, yes.
This is 4th grade common sense, like you said, and maybe not so common. You need to have these programs in
Yeah.
place, and it's so simple. Yet, you know, we have these still bureaucratic policies where. I had somebody in Mississippi who the assistant principal for discipline got fired for sending too many people or dealing with too many people in the disciplinary office. And it's like, why do you have an assistant principal for discipline if you don't send troublemakers? You want to keep them in the class? You want to make the teacher?
Right.
No, that's why you have that person. So
Right.
recognizing that we have tools in place,
Right.
you have, again, I'll go back to Resuscitate.
Right.
You've got a training program
Right.
that can equip you. Why not just use what's there and work with it?
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, implementation is important because I was actually a paraprofessional with the Boy Scouts of America. And we had the youth protection training. I thought it was amazing. But I'm also a witness that when we were at some of the camps and things of that nature, they used to call me Miss T. And they used to, you know, I used to get on their nerves, to be honest, because I really, you know, executed the youth protection training. And there were some things that I saw that I was like, no, this is not acceptable. But then look what happened. Look what became exposed. Because like you say, we have things in place for protections, but are we implementing them? What are we doing with them? And where's the accountability that comes with that community? And so these are just a lot of, it's just so much we can talk so much more about. And we talk anyway.
Right.
But, you know, just to close us out, just to share, you know, just talk with our audience and let them know, you know, just some steps they can take, just some small steps they can take to help with prevention. Just share some of that.
there are a lot of things that are universal principles, and I point out to my business students in particular, something that works in audit probably works in compliance, probably works in supply chain. So the first step is God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen.
Yeah.
What is being said? What is not being said?
Yes.
Hey, I this is a globe, right?
Right.
Is it a nice globe? Is it? I didn't say. Maybe I don't like that, right? You're reading between the lines a little bit, particularly with children who may feel vulnerable, even in the circumstances pre-child abuse where there's an adult that makes them uncomfortable, or even a teenager, and they don't feel comfortable, but they don't know how to articulate it yet. They don't have the phrasing, they don't have the education, they don't have the training to put words with it. But when they say, oh, do you want to go over to Susie's house? Wait, why the pause?
Yes.
Don't wait on your 4-year-old to say, well, I found that the environment was unsuitable for...
Oh, my God.
Unfortunately, that was me, and my mother's friends always said, he's going to be a lawyer. So, but most people aren't going to do that. So listen to what isn't being said as much as what's being said. Trust your gut. Your gut is, the research has shown, it's usually a lot of tangible representations and manifestations that you are taking in, that your brain has put in the subconscious. Right. It's not psychic energy. It's not necessarily divine guidance, even though I believe in that. But it is, at least the research shows, you observing things and your mind putting it basically in your gut. You're feeling, this isn't right. If it doesn't feel right, ask yourself why. Don't listen to that still small voice and say, wait a second, right? And there's so many things where you say, why would a 50-year-old man want to take my 12-year-old daughter on a park ride without all my other kids?
Yes.
Just pause, stop, look, and listen, right?
Yeah.
All these old principles, they apply in the same venue. So
they do.
I'd encourage people to listen, take their time, trust their gut, and finally, I would say avail themselves of resources. Of course, we talked about resuscitate, but there are a lot of ways that people can take a proactive stance to say, identify these things, be aware of what it means. You take time for driving. You take time to identify what a green, yellow, and red light is. Right? So, and then people say, well, I did the training. Then you got to refresh it, right? How many times do you make your bed? Once a year? No, you got to make it every day, because if you sleep in it, you got to remake it.
Right.
Retraining is important.
Right.
I wouldn't want a pilot who just said, well, 1976, I flew a plane. I'm ready to go again. I'll wait.
Yeah.
Any other passengers? Any standby passengers want to take my seat?
Wow.
You need those CLEs, CEUs, etc.
Right.
And the informal version for parents. So those are some ways that I think people should do it. Take ownership. It's our community. Just like in my political role, I always reminded people it's our money, it's our tax dollars.
Yes.
Make sure you know where it's being spent and that you agree with it. They're your children. Make sure you know where they are and who they're with.
Right. And that is, I don't have much to say after that, because it's just the truth. They're our children. I have adult children, but I still look at every child as my child, because I believe injustice to one child is an injustice to all children. One traumatized child, and the effects of that can affect all children. And so I have grandchildren, and I want this cycle to stop. And it won't stop overnight, because it didn't start overnight. But I believe that we all can take a stand for prevention of child sexual abuse, because most people want to talk about child abuse, and yes, we can, but it's something about when we talk about the child's sexual abuse. And I know because many of you, for generations, many of you have suppressed trauma and hidden trauma in your lives. So it's kind of hard when you start talking about it and the trigger is there. And you get triggered and you don't want to talk about it. But we have to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, we'll never do anything about it. And if we never do anything about it, the same hurt and fear and trauma that you experience, our children will experience from generation to generation. And then you'll continue to ask, what's wrong with these people in society? What's wrong with the world today? What's wrong with the world today is we have to take more action in being proactive and making sure children are protected, because as they grow, whatever was unresolved in their young lives grow with them in their adult lives. So again, thank you so much for joining us. The information that you've given is so valuable, And I'm always blessed to be in your presence because you're such a blessing, not just to me, but to so many. And again, if you run for president, just know you have my vote, okay?
Thank
And
you for the work you do, though. Again, it's an honor to be in your presence and know the work that you do, the energy that you put into it. I wish if half of us did half as much as you do, this would be prevented already.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much. We're always looking for volunteers and donors. So let's just get that straight. But thank you all again. If you have any questions, if you're looking for resources again, you can go to our website and find, you're trying to find Judge Dietrich here or any information, the information will be on our website. Thank you all for joining us again. This is Dr. Nicole Lynette, your host for the Reach In Talk Show. Until next time, reach in.